The command center at NASA buzzed with an unusual frenzy, each monitor flickering with data streams and celestial images. Dr. Ethan Harris, his eyes locked on the central screen, tapped a series of commands into his keyboard. Beside him, his colleague and old friend, Dr. Mark Jensen, leaned in closer, a mix of skepticism and intrigue painted across his face. "Ethan, are you sure about this? It could just be another ghost signal," Mark said, his voice tinged with the weariness of many long nights spent chasing shadows across the cosmos. Ethan shook his head, his focus unwavering. "No, this is different, Mark. The patterns are too consistent, too deliberate. It's not just cosmic noise. Look here." He pointed at the screen, where sequences of signals formed a discernible pattern. Mark adjusted his glasses, squinting at the data. "So, you're saying it's intentional? A message?" "Exactly," Ethan replied. "And not just any message. It's structured, almost like—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Like a greeting." As the implications sank in, the room's atmosphere thickened with anticipation. Ethan and Mark exchanged a look, a silent agreement that this moment could change everything. "Let's bring Sarah and Tom in on this. We need to verify the signal integrity before we jump to any conclusions," Mark suggested. Within minutes, Dr. Sarah Chan, an expert in signal decryption, and Tom Brewer, a linguist and codebreaker, joined them at the console. Sarah plugged in her laptop, her fingers flying over the keys as she ran diagnostics. "Signal integrity checks out," she announced after a tense 5 minutes. "It's stable and repeating. If this is a message, it's meant to be found." Tom, his eyes wide with excitement, was already parsing through the data. "There's a pattern to the intervals. It's like a language built on mathematics and music. Give me a few hours and I think I can start to decode it." The team worked in sync, each member contributing to a rapidly unfolding puzzle. Hours turned into caffeine-fueled determination as pizza boxes piled up and the initial sequence began to yield its secrets. "Got something," Tom exclaimed. The room fell silent as all eyes fixed on him. "It's a greeting, all right. It's repetitive, simple, but clear. We hear you, we see you, we await response." They're not just sending a message, they're inviting a dialogue. Ethan's heart raced. This was the moment he had always dreamed of, yet it felt surreal. "We need to craft a response. Something universal, non-threatening." Mark nodded, his earlier skepticism replaced with a resolve. "Let's get the linguistics and cultural anthropology teams on board. If we're going to reply, we need to get it right." As the team drafted a response, the weight of their task settled on Ethan's shoulders. This was no longer just a scientific pursuit. It was a diplomatic mission, humanity reaching out into the vast unknown. "All right, let's send it," Ethan finally said, the crafted message ready after hours of deliberation. They all watched as the command was executed, the message sent hurtling through space, crossing light years in a bid to touch another civilization. Mark placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Now we wait." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars displayed across the screen. The universe seemed both impossibly large and intimately close in that moment, filled with infinite possibilities. They had done their part. Now it was time for the universe to reply. Chapter 2. The Arrival. The weeks following the transmission were marked by a global suspense that transcended borders, languages, and cultures. At NASA's command center, the team led by Dr. Ethan Harris and Dr. Mark Jensen had grown, now including Dr. Alex Ramirez, a theoretical physicist, and Dr. Joel Turner, an expert in exobiology. Together, they monitored the skies with a vigilance that bordered on obsession. It was Alex who first noticed the anomaly on their radar, a blip that was approaching Earth at a steady pace, unmistakably artificial. "Look at this," Alex called out, gesturing everyone over. The room buzzed as the team congregated around his station. "What have we got?" Joel asked, peering over Alex's shoulder. "It's a craft. No natural object moves like that. It's slowing down, adjusting its trajectory. It's coming here," Alex explained, his voice a mix of excitement and nerves. Mark turned to Ethan. "You think it's them?" Ethan nodded, his throat tight. Has to be. Let's prepare for first contact. We need to set up a welcome protocol. Peaceful, respectful. Joel chimed in, and scientifically thorough. We have no idea what we're dealing with biologically. The preparations were a whirlwind of activity. The United Nations was briefed, and a delegation was quickly assembled, consisting of diplomats, scientists, and security personnel. A secluded airbase in the Mojave Desert was chosen as the landing site, transformed overnight into a hub of international cooperation and scientific inquiry. As the alien craft entered the Earth's atmosphere, the world watched through every possible medium. The sleek, shimmering vessel touched down gently on the tarmac, its design unlike anything human engineers had conceived. It was both ethereal and imposing, a silent testament to the capabilities of its creators. The hatch opened slowly, releasing a hiss of atmospheric gases, and from the vessel emerged Leah, the alien envoy. Her form was humanoid but with skin that shimmered like the surface of a star, eyes vast and luminescent. She was accompanied by a small entourage, each member distinct in form and feature. Ethan stepped forward as the designated human representative, his heart pounding in his chest. "Welcome to Earth," he said, his voice steady despite the surrealness of the moment. "Thank you, Dr. Harris?" Leah replied, her voice melodic and resonant, her Earth languages flawless. "I am Leah, envoy of the Illics. We come in peace, eager to learn and share." Mark and the others joined Ethan, forming a welcoming line. Leah introduced her companions, each nodding their greetings. Alex, ever the scientist, was brimming with questions. "Your ship, it's incredible. What can you tell us about your technology?" Leah smiled, a gesture surprisingly human. "We have much to share with you, Dr. Ramirez. Our technology, our culture, our sciences. This is a day of new beginnings." Joel, intrigued by the biological implications, asked, "And what of your biology? We're eager to understand how you thrive in environments that might be hostile to us." "Our biology is adaptive, resilient," Leah explained. "Much like our technology, it allows us to interact safely with diverse ecosystems. We look forward to mutual exchanges of knowledge." As the initial formalities concluded, the team escorted Leah and her companions to a specially prepared conference center, designed to accommodate human and Illics needs alike. Over dinner, a blend of Earth and synthesized Illics cuisine, the conversations flowed freely. Ethan found himself beside Leah, her presence both calming and captivating. "You can really see me, can't you, when others can't?" Leah asked quietly, her voice tinged with curiosity. "Yes," Ethan admitted, wondering at it himself. "Ever since your first message." "That is unusual," she mused. "Visibility is a choice for us. You have a rare gift." As the evening drew to a close, the bonds of a nascent friendship had been forged under the stars of a shared sky. The path forward was uncertain, but for the first time, humanity was not walking it alone. Chapter 3: A Visible Connection. The next morning, the Mojave Desert Air Base was alive with anticipation and activity. The media circus had descended overnight, eager to capture every moment of this historic interaction. Inside the secure compound, Dr. Ethan Harris and Leah, along with their respective teams, prepared for a series of collaborative meetings and experiments designed to deepen mutual understanding and establish protocols for communication and interaction. Dr. Mark Jensen, alongside Dr. Joel Turner and Dr. Alex Ramirez, was setting up in one of the labs when Ethan approached, a thoughtful look on his face. "Mark, I need to discuss something unusual about my interactions with Leah," Ethan began, glancing around to ensure privacy. Mark raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh? What's that?" "It's about how I can see her, even when she's using her species' invisibility. She mentioned it might be a rare ability. I think we should explore this further. Maybe it has scientific implications we haven't considered." "Definitely," Mark agreed. "Let's set up a controlled experiment." "Alex, Joel, you guys in?" Alex looked up from his equipment, his interest piqued. "Seeing through alien stealth technology? Count me in." Joel nodded, his mind already racing with the biological implications. Could give us insights into their physiology. Let's do it. The team gathered in a specialized observation room designed to monitor and record various environmental and biological factors. Leah joined them, her curiosity about the human scientific process evident. Dr. Harris, Dr. Jensen, I am ready to participate in your experiments, Leah announced, her voice calm and composed. Thank you, Leah, Ethan responded, as he briefed her on their initial tests. We're going to start with some basic visibility trials. We'd like you to activate your invisibility, and I'll describe what I see. As Leah nodded and her form began to shimmer, fading to near transparency, Ethan concentrated, describing aloud the subtle cues he could still discern. Your outline, it's like a heat shimmer on a hot road. It's very faint, but once I focus, it becomes clear. Mark, monitoring the readouts from the sensors, noted, there's no detectable change in the environment. It's all him. Joel added, it suggests a unique perceptual ability. Maybe it's something in Ethan's visual cortex, or perhaps a pheromonal response. Let's run some scans on Ethan while he's observing, Alex suggested, already moving to set up the necessary equipment. As they conducted the tests, Leah's interest in their discussion grew. Your approach to science, it's very hands-on and collaborative. In Illich's culture, we often conduct our research in isolation to prevent bias. Ethan, while undergoing a brain scan, smiled. We find that multiple perspectives often lead to breakthroughs we might not achieve alone. After the session, as the data was being processed, Leah and Ethan took a walk around the facility grounds, the Earth's sun bright above them. You said your visibility is a choice. How do you control it? Ethan asked, genuinely curious about her abilities. It's a natural ability like breathing to us. We can modulate our body's interaction with light. It's more than just bending it. It's about blending in completely, Leah explained, her tone reflective. And yet, I can still see you, Ethan mused. There's something unique here, something between us. Leah paused, turning to face him. Perhaps it is not just scientific. Perhaps it's personal. The connection between them, tentative at first, was beginning to deepen, bridging the gap between two vastly different beings through a shared quest for understanding. As they returned to the lab, the team was eager to share their preliminary findings. Joel was the first to speak. Ethan, your scans show unusual activity in your occipital lobe when you're observing Leah in her invisible state. There's definitely something out of the ordinary happening. Ethan glanced at Leah, excitement and a hint of wonder in his expression. Looks like we're on the brink of discovering something amazing. The day ended with more questions than answers, but with each query, the human and Illich's teams drew closer, their bonds strengthened by the shared language of discovery and the unique connection blossoming between Ethan and Leah. Chapter 4. The Experiment. The Mojave Air Base's research wing had been transformed into a bustling hub of activity. Lab tables were cluttered with equipment, thermal scanners, light meters, and monitors tracking everything from bioelectric signals to faint atmospheric changes. Every scientist was eager to dissect the mystery of Leah's visibility and Ethan's unique perception. Ethan and Mark entered the primary lab together, both carrying fresh cups of coffee and folders brimming with notes. So, Alex and Joel have been up all night running preliminary analysis, Mark said as they walked. I think they're onto something. They swear it's not just your eyes picking up light. Something else is going on. Ethan took a sip of his coffee and frowned. They think it's neurological? Mark nodded. Alex said it's like your brain is compensating for something our instruments can't measure. And Joel's running more biological tests on Leah to figure out how her invisibility works on a molecular level. As they entered the room, Alex and Joel were huddled over a set of screens. Leah sat nearby, watching the team's efforts with a calm but curious demeanor. She turned toward Ethan and Mark when they walked in. Dr. Harris, Dr. Jensen, Leah greeted. I assume you're here to see the latest results. Leah, Ethan said, smiling. Thanks for being patient with us. This might be new for us, but I imagine it's just as strange for you. It is, she admitted. On my world, We have never encountered a species that perceives us so directly. This phenomenon may hold answers for both our peoples. Joel looked up from his screen, a grin on his face. Ethan, we've got some preliminary data. When you look at Leah in her invisible state, your occipital lobe lights up like crazy. But it's not just your eyes doing the work. There's heightened activity in your temporal lobe too, like your brain's interpreting signals that aren't strictly visual. Mark raised an eyebrow. So, you're saying his brain is filling in the blanks? More like translating data from another source, Alex chimed in. We're running models now, but it's almost as if there's a non-visual component. Something that lets him see her. Ethan leaned on the table, staring at the charts. And Leah's biology? Did you find anything that explains how she can control her visibility? Joel tapped a few keys, bringing up another set of graphs. Her skin cells have specialized structures we haven't seen before, sort of a bio-optic array. They don't just refract light. They actively bend it around her, making her disappear from normal sight. Leah added, it's a natural adaptation from our evolutionary past, a means of survival when we faced predators. So, you're like a living cloaking device, Mark said, impressed. That's incredible. It is a part of us, Leah said simply. But Dr. Harris is the first to bypass it. We must learn why. Over the next few hours, the team set up a controlled experiment. They placed Leah in a transparent chamber equipped with every sensor they could muster. Ethan would observe her both with the naked eye and through instruments, allowing the team to compare the data. All right, Leah, Joel said. Activate your invisibility whenever you're ready. Leah nodded and closed her eyes. Her form shimmered and faded, leaving only faint distortions in the air. Ethan? Mark prompted. I see her, Ethan said. It's like looking through a heat haze. Her outline is faint but clear. Alex checked his monitors. We're picking up nothing on traditional light spectrums. Whatever he's seeing, it's not visible light. Joel adjusted another setting. And there's no change in infrared or ultraviolet. This is something else entirely. Leah, Ethan asked. Can you feel anything different when I look at you? She tilted her head thoughtfully. No, but I can sense your focus. It's not unpleasant, just unusual. The team ran test after test, comparing Ethan's observations to every conceivable metric. By the end of the day, their results were consistent. Ethan could see Leah when she was invisible, but the instruments could not. Theories began to circulate, from undiscovered light frequencies to subtle electromagnetic fields. As the sun set, the group convened in the conference room to review their findings. Everyone looked tired, but the excitement of discovery kept them going. So, what do we know? Ethan asked, leaning forward. Mark summarized. We know Leah's invisibility isn't just bending light. Her body does something far more complex, which our instruments can't detect. But you, Ethan, you're picking it up through some kind of neurological process we don't fully understand. Alex nodded. And the more we test, the clearer it becomes. There's a unique interaction between your biology and hers. Ethan glanced at Leah. And that means this isn't just a scientific anomaly. It's personal. Something about me. Something about you. It's unique to us. Leah's expression was calm but thoughtful. Perhaps our differences create a bridge rather than a barrier. Whatever the reason, we are the only ones who can see this connection. Joel looked between them, intrigued. That's the next step then. Figuring out how this connection works. If we can understand it, it might lead to breakthroughs in perception, communication, even technology. Agreed, Ethan said. We keep digging. This is just the beginning. The group broke for the night, their minds buzzing with questions and possibilities. The experiment had raised more questions than answers, but it had also forged a deeper sense of collaboration between human and alien. Chapter 5. A World of Emotions. The morning air felt crisp as Ethan walked across the compound's courtyard. The last few days had been a whirlwind of experiments, data analysis, and late-night strategy sessions. He found Leah sitting alone on a low stone wall, watching the sunrise. Her skin shimmered faintly in the light, a reminder of her otherworldly nature. Hey, Ethan greeted, his voice soft as he approached. Mind some company? Leah turned, a gentle smile playing on her lips. Of course, Dr. Harris. Please sit. Ethan settled beside her. For a moment, neither spoke, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. Then Leah broke it. Your world is vibrant, she said, her tone thoughtful. The colors, the sounds, everything feels so alive. Ethan chuckled. You should see it outside the desert. Big cities, forests, oceans. There's so much more out there. I would like that, Leah replied. Our environment is quite different. Very controlled, very orderly. I'm beginning to understand why your people hold emotion in such high regard. Ethan tilted his head, intrigued. What do you mean? Leah hesitated before answering. On my world, emotions are seen as secondary, something to be regulated. Efficiency and logic come first. But here, she gestured vaguely toward the horizon. I feel things I didn't know I could feel. It's as if your world speaks a language my heart understands, even if my mind struggles to keep up. That's not a bad thing, Ethan said. Feeling, it's what makes life worth living. I see that now, Leah admitted, her voice quieter. I didn't understand it before, but being here, seeing how you all connect with each other, with your surroundings, it's enlightening. Ethan glanced at her, noticing the subtle shift in her expression. Leah, are you happy here? With us? I think yes, she said, her eyes meeting his. It's strange, though. Happiness is not something I've been taught to value. But now that I feel it, I don't want to lose it. Ethan smiled. That's the beauty of it. It's something you find on your own, not something someone gives you. Leah nodded, her gaze distant. I want to learn more, to experience more. Well then, Ethan said, rising to his feet. Let's start right now. I'll show you something that always makes me feel alive. Leah stood as well, her curiosity piqued. And what is that? You'll see, Ethan said with a grin, leading her toward the base's garage. Mark and Joel were there, unloading gear from a truck. Hey, Ethan, what's the plan? Mark called out. Ethan waved. We're taking Leah on a little trip. Get her out of the compound. Joel raised an eyebrow. You sure that's okay? What if the higher-ups? They'll understand, Ethan interrupted. Besides, she deserves to see more than just lab equipment and tarmac. Mark smirked. Count me in. I've been cooped up here too long. The four of them piled into a rugged off-road vehicle with Ethan at the wheel. They drove out into the open desert, leaving the base behind. The landscape was vast, an endless sea of sand and rock, punctuated by the occasional cactus or scrub bush. Leah sat in the passenger seat, her eyes scanning the scenery. It's beautiful, she said, her voice filled with wonder. It's the middle of nowhere, Mark quipped from the back seat. I could show you a real view back in Montana. Joel laughed. Montana's got nothing on the Mojave. Ethan grinned. All right, let's not start a state rivalry. This place has its own charm. And tonight, it's going to be spectacular. They parked near a rocky outcrop as the sun dipped below the horizon. Ethan pulled a blanket and some gear from the back of the vehicle. All right, everyone, set up the telescope, and let's get ready for the show. Show? Leah asked, intrigued. You'll see, Ethan said with a wink. Mark and Joel worked together to set up the telescope, arguing playfully over the best angle. Leah helped Ethan lay out the blanket and arrange the small portable projector they had brought. As the sky darkened, the stars emerged, countless points of light scattered across a velvet backdrop. Ethan adjusted the telescope, then stepped aside. Leah, take a look. She peered into the eyepiece, her breath catching. They're so close, she whispered. So clear. Just wait, Ethan said, dimming the projector and starting a presentation he'd prepared. This is what we call a meteor shower. Sure enough, streaks of light began to flash across the sky, brief but brilliant. Leah's expression lit up as she watched the display. Mark and Joel lounged on the blanket, swapping stories about past stargazing trips. Remember that time in college when we thought we saw a UFO? Mark asked. It was just a weather balloon, Joel replied. But I'll admit, I still felt a little spooked. Ethan chuckled, sitting beside Leah. You should have been there. Mark screamed so loud we thought he'd been abducted. Leah smiled, her laughter soft but genuine. You humans are full of surprises. And you're full of mysteries, Ethan said. But we'll figure them out together. She turned to him, her gaze steady. I'd like that. As the meteor shower reached its peak, the group sat in quiet awe. The shared experience, the wonder of the cosmos, drew them closer. Leah, once an enigmatic presence, was now a part of their world. A friend, a colleague, and, to Ethan, something more. Chapter 6, Shadows of Doubt. The following day, the desert sun was just beginning to rise when Ethan knocked on Mark's door. The hallway was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the base's HVAC system. When Mark opened the door, he looked half awake, his hair sticking out at odd angles. Morning, Ethan said. I need to talk to you. Mark blinked a few times before stepping aside and motioning for Ethan to come in. This couldn't wait until coffee? It's about Leah, Ethan said, closing the door behind him. Something feels off. Mark sat down at the small table in his room, reaching for the coffee pot he always kept on standby. Off how? She's been the model guest. Cooperative, curious, way more patient than most of us would be in her shoes. Ethan leaned against the counter, arms crossed. It's not her behavior. I don't know. It's like the more time I spend with her, the more I can't shake this feeling that I'm missing something. Like there's a piece of the puzzle I'm not seeing. Mark poured himself a cup of coffee, took a long sip, and studied Ethan. You think she's hiding something? I'm not sure, Ethan admitted. I mean, she's been open about her culture, her people's abilities. But then there are these moments, when she looks at me a certain way or hesitates before answering a question, where I feel like there's more she's not saying. Mark set his mug down. Maybe you're overthinking it. She's in a strange place, surrounded by strange people. You can't expect her to spill her entire life story in a week. I know, Ethan said, rubbing the back of his neck. But you've seen the reports. Not everyone back home is thrilled about us working with the Illics. Some are already questioning her motives, and I don't want to give them any more reason to doubt her. Mark frowned. Look, Ethan, Leah's been nothing but cooperative. But if you've got concerns, talk to her. Straightforward like you always do. Just don't start second-guessing everything. That's a slippery slope. Ethan nodded slowly. You're right. I'll talk to her. Later that morning, Ethan found Leah in the main lab, standing near one of the observation tanks. She was watching a team of technicians calibrate a set of instruments, her expression thoughtful. Leah, Ethan said as he approached. Do you have a minute? She turned to him, her silver eyes meeting his. Of course, Dr. Harris. Is something wrong? Not wrong exactly, he said. I just wanted to clear something up. I've been wondering about a few things, and I thought it would be best to ask you directly. Leah tilted her head slightly, her curiosity evident. What would you like to know? Ethan hesitated, searching for the right words. We've learned so much about your people's technology, your biology, the way you communicate. But what about your society? Your government? I don't mean to pry, but how are decisions made among the Illics? How did you end up as their envoy? Leah's expression shifted, a flicker of something that could have been hesitation or merely thoughtfulness. Our society values collective knowledge and consensus. We do not have a singular ruler or government in the way your nations do. Instead, we rely on a council of experts in various fields, science, philosophy, ethics, to guide our people. And you're one of those experts? Ethan pressed gently. In a sense, she said. I am what you might call a cultural liaison. My role is to learn about other civilizations and share that knowledge with our council. I volunteered to be the first to meet your people because I believed in the value of direct interaction. Ethan nodded, her answer seeming reasonable enough. But there was still something about her tone that left him unsettled. You volunteered, but do you ever feel like you're under pressure? Like there's more expected of you than you can give. Leah's gaze softened. We all carry responsibilities, Dr. Harris. But I chose this path because I wanted to understand others and help bridge the distances between our worlds. That is not a burden. It is a calling. He couldn't argue with her sincerity, yet the nagging feeling remained. Before he could probe further, Joel walked in, a stack of papers in hand. Ethan, I need you to review these samples. And Leah, your biological readings from yesterday's tests are ready if you want to take a look. Thank you, Dr. Turner, Leah said, stepping away to examine the data on a nearby console. Ethan turned to Joel, lowering his voice. You think she's telling us everything? Joel raised an eyebrow. What brought this on? Just a hunch, Ethan admitted. Something feels incomplete. Maybe you're looking for something that isn't there, Joel suggested. Or maybe it's just that she's different, a whole other species. There's bound to be things we can't fully understand. Yeah, maybe, Ethan said, but the uncertainty lingered. As the day wore on, the base hummed with its usual activity. Ethan tried to focus on his work, yet his thoughts kept returning to his conversation with Leah. He found himself watching her more closely. Her interactions with the team, the way she handled the equipment, even her casual comments about human culture. Mark caught him staring at one point and smirked. If you keep that up, she's going to think you've got a crush on her. Ethan shot him a look. Very funny. I'm just trying to understand her. Sure you are, Mark teased. But seriously, Ethan, don't get so caught up in finding something wrong that you miss what's right in front of you. She's here, she's helping, and she's clearly on our side. Ethan sighed. I hope you're right. By the time night fell, the questions in Ethan's mind hadn't been answered. But for now, he decided to let them rest. Maybe, he thought, the truth would reveal itself in time, if he was patient enough to see it. Chapter 7. The Invisible Made Visible. In the days that followed, the team's collaborative efforts took on a new intensity. Ethan, Mark, and the others worked late into the night, comparing Leah's advanced biological adaptations to anything remotely similar in known Earth organisms. Each new data set brought them closer to understanding how her people's invisibility worked. At the same time, the growing bond between Ethan and Leah was becoming more apparent, both to themselves and to everyone around them. One afternoon, as the team gathered in the main lab to review their latest findings, Leah stood by Ethan's side, her calm demeanor masking the curiosity and anticipation that had come to define her time among the humans. So, what's the latest? Mark asked, gesturing toward the monitors. Joel leaned forward, pointing at a set of graphs. We're seeing consistent patterns in the biooptic structures. They shift light around her body in a way that's more complex than any natural camouflage we've observed. But that's not all. We think there's a neurological component, an active control mechanism that she uses to trigger the effect. Alex nodded in agreement. It's not just reflexive. Leah can consciously decide when to disappear. That's what makes it so extraordinary. Leah, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Our people learned long ago how to refine this ability. It was born out of necessity, but over generations, we came to understand it as an extension of ourselves, something we can shape at will. Ethan looked at her, his curiosity unmasked. You mean it started as a survival mechanism and evolved into a skill you could hone? Like how humans learn to paint or play an instrument? Not quite, Leah replied, her silver eyes reflecting the overhead lights. It's less a learned skill and more an inherited trait that we've adapted to our needs. But, yes, there is a certain artistry to its use. Fascinating, Mark murmured. You know, if you're willing, we'd love to document that process in more detail. Leah smiled slightly. I would be happy to assist. Your curiosity reminds me of our own scientists in their early days. Eager to understand, eager to create connections. Joel cleared his throat. Speaking of connections, Ethan, weren't you working on a theory about how your own perception ties into Leah's invisibility? Ethan nodded, snapping out of his thoughts. Right. I've been analyzing my neurological scans from when I look at her, invisible or not. The patterns in my visual cortex suggest my brain is picking up on subtle cues that normal human vision ignores. I'm not just seeing her. I'm sensing her presence in a way I can't fully explain yet. Mark raised an eyebrow. You sure that's not just your mind playing tricks on you? I thought that at first, Ethan admitted. But the data's consistent. It's like my brain is interpreting information that no one else's does. Alex leaned back in his chair. So, you're saying it's not just her biology that's unique? Something about you, too? Possibly, Ethan said. And if that's the case, it could mean humans are capable of more than we ever realized, at least under certain conditions. Leah watched him closely, her expression thoughtful. You have a gift, Dr. Harris. Whether it is unique to you or something latent in all humans, it has allowed you to see me, to know me. Perhaps that is why I feel so at ease in your presence. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, the others were silent. Then Mark broke the tension with a grin. Well, I guess you've got the winning eyes, Ethan. Everyone chuckled, and the mood lightened. But Ethan couldn't shake the deeper meaning behind Leah's comment. Over the days and nights they had worked together, he had come to feel a connection with her that went beyond science or professional collaboration. It was as if seeing her when no one else could had opened a doorway to something far more profound. As the team wrapped up their day's work, Ethan walked Leah back to the small quarters that had been set up for her at the base. The corridor was quiet, the hum of the base's systems a comforting background noise. Leah, Ethan began as they stopped in front of her door. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about how you feel at ease around me. I think I feel the same way. She turned to face him, her shimmering form radiant even under the fluorescent lights. I am glad to hear that, Ethan. I have learned much from you, but it is not only knowledge that I value. It is your company, your kindness. Ethan hesitated, then said, Would you like to take a walk with me? Just for a little while. The night sky out here is something I think you'd appreciate. She nodded. I would like that. They walked together out onto the open tarmac, the stars above a breathtaking canopy. The desert air was cool and still, the world around them vast and quiet. For a while, neither spoke, content to let the moment stretch between them. Then Leah reached out, her hand brushing against his. Thank you, she said softly, for showing me your world, for helping me understand. Ethan turned to her, his voice low. You've helped me understand too, more than I thought possible. In that shared silence, under the endless expanse of stars, the connection between them felt tangible. An invisible thread that bound two vastly different beings together. Chapter 8. A New Dawn. The final weeks of Leah's stay on Earth felt like they passed in both a blur and slow motion. Every day brought new discoveries and deeper conversations. The humans and Illics had developed a rhythm to their collaboration, but the looming question of Leah's departure hung heavily over the team, especially over Ethan. One morning, as the team convened in the lab, the energy was subdued. Mark was sifting through data, Joel was checking biological samples, and Alex was reviewing a simulation on one of the larger monitors. Leah stood by the window, gazing out at the desert, her expression distant. Leah, Ethan called softly, breaking her reverie. She turned toward him, her silver eyes meeting his. We need to talk about what comes next. She nodded and stepped away from the window. I know my time here is limited, Dr. Harris. Ethan, he corrected gently. Just call me Ethan. A faint smile crossed her lips. Ethan, she repeated. You and your team have shown me so much, about your world, about the way your people think, feel, and explore. I had not anticipated forming attachments. Alex, overhearing, raised an eyebrow. Attachments, huh? Sounds like we've made quite an impression. Joel chuckled, leaning back in his chair. Well, it's not every day you meet someone who can turn invisible and still be seen by our star scientist here. Mark set down his coffee mug. All right, you two. Give them a moment. As the others returned to their work, Ethan gestured for Leah to join him outside. They stepped onto the base's observation deck, the wind carrying a hint of warmth even in the early hour. The sky was beginning to brighten with the promise of sunrise. "I don't know what happens after you leave," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "But I do know that what we've built here, this connection, feels too important to just end." Leah folded her hands in front of her, her shimmering skin catching the first rays of dawn. "It will not end, Ethan. Even when I return to my people, the knowledge and experiences we've shared will remain with me. I will ensure that our council understands the value of your world." "That's not what I meant," he said, stepping closer. "I mean us, you and me. I've spent weeks trying to understand what makes you invisible to everyone else. But now I feel like I see you more clearly than anything else in my life." She turned to face him fully, her gaze steady. "Ethan, I feel the same. On my world, I have never experienced what you call emotions in such depth. Being here with you has changed me." For a moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of their words settling around them. Then Ethan said, "Do you have to go back? Could you stay a little longer?" "I must return," she said gently. "My people will want to hear what I have learned. They will have questions, and I am the only one who can answer them." Ethan nodded, his heart sinking. He had known this moment would come, but it didn't make it any easier. "But," Leah continued, "this is not a goodbye forever. Our worlds have connected. There will be more exchanges, more opportunities to collaborate. And I believe that includes us." He looked at her, hopeful. "You really think we'll see each other again?" "I know we will," she said. "And when we do, we will continue what we've started." As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the desert, the two of them stood in quiet understanding. Their journey wasn't over. It was merely the beginning of something neither of them had fully anticipated, something as vast and uncharted as the cosmos itself.